The Enigma coder decoder. The secret of radar. Technical advances that changed the course of the Second World War. But few know about an invention that helped win the First World War. In 1917, what's now Fremont, California, was rich farming country. And the Shin House, home of the James Shin family, was a local showplace. These prosperous farmers were not simple country folks. They were well-educated and interested in world affairs. Charles Shin had attended Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. His old classmate and former roommate, United States President Woodrow Wilson, faced a difficult decision: whether he was to be the first president to send U.S. troops overseas in defense of foreign soil. Many American lives had been lost when German submarines sank the British passenger ship Lusitania. And because America was providing materials to Britain, Germany was attacking American shipping on the high seas. In spite of this, many Americans felt that they did not want to get pulled into Europe's war. The controversy continued until British intelligence intercepted a telegram authorizing the German ambassador in Mexico to offer support to the Mexican government, encouraging the Mexicans to recover the territories lost during the Mexican-American War in 1848. This included the states of Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona. Americans were outraged by Germany's attempt to interfere, and war was declared. But what is this mysterious piece of equipment that played such an important role in the outcome of the First World War? A sock knitting machine. How could this domestic machine possibly play a critical part in winning a war?
Okay, so when we want to start the ankle of the sock with ribbing, we start actually the waste yarn with the ribbing pattern and then just work the new yarn into it so it sort of automatically catches up with the pattern.
So you'll start off with the ribbing.
So we've got the ribbing already in the waste yarn, and now I'm going to join in our real sock yarn. So we put it on the spool, and basically we can just tie a knot and we work through the yarn, and when it starts with... Okay, so now we've got the actual sock yarn engaged on the machine. So I'm going to make the cuff. So I start that by knitting 26 rows. And one of the things, you think, how can I keep track of what's going on here? I always count the row when it hits 6 o'clock. I pretend this is a clock. And I go 1, 2, 3, so I know how many rows I've done. Because there's no other counter. There's no way. There's no other counter to do this. So go around.
How could this contraption have as much impact on the war effort as bullets and bombs? Thousands of soldiers fighting in the trenches in France were badly crippled by trench foot, a fungus infection of the feet caused by standing for hours in cold, stagnant water without being able to remove wet socks or boots. Dry socks were important to the health of the troops. If untreated, trench foot could turn gangrenous. Before the time of antibiotics, it was necessary to amputate the infected part to save the life of the soldier. Trench foot could be prevented if the soldiers were able to dry their feet and change socks several times a day. Although it looks a bit like a tin can with a crank, the circular sock machine really did play a vital part in helping win the war.
That's 26 rows, so I'm stopping at 6 o'clock. Okay.
A firm in Rockford, Illinois, incorporated in 1880, was the first company in the world to manufacture socks commercially. By 1904, this firm produced 5,400 pairs of socks a day. But at the outbreak of World War I, commercial production of stockings was still not widespread. Most stockings were produced by hand for one's own family or friends, or sold as a cottage industry, and only a lucky few had a home version of the circular sock knitting machine. Once the need for socks for the troops was recognized, the call went out, and the home front mobilized.
Okay, so now I've gone all the way around once. I've sealed the cuff basically. Now I'm going to do 45 rows, which will just be the ribbing, will be the ankle. And so again,
knitting clubs were formed, and each American Red Cross division was expected to provide 55,000 pairs of socks within 3 months for the war effort. The International Red Cross arranged for the purchase and distribution of wool and patterns to civilian knitters, set up knitting rooms, including one in the Fifth Avenue mansion of John D. Rockefeller, and gave away circular sock knitting machines to home knitters who would commit to producing a minimum of 30 pairs of socks for the war effort. While a fast hand knitter could produce a pair of socks in a week, a circular sock knitting machine in the hands of an experienced knitter could produce a pair in 40 minutes.
Okay, there's 45. Okay, now at this point, I want to end the ribbing and just have solid sock going all the way around. So I need to put back in the needles that I took out to do the ribbing. So these needles are all, they go into a spring that's around the
It requires 400 yards of yarn to produce one pair of socks. In September 1918, all American yarn retailers were ordered by the War Industries Board to turn over their stock of service yarn to the Red Cross. And some went back to more old-fashioned ways to produce their own yarn. The wool used for this demonstration is from the East Bay Regional Park District's historic Ardenwood Farms Romney sheep. Ardenwood was always primarily a grain farm with a little bit of dairy to round out business. Some Ardenwood land was sharecropped, and some small parcels were rented out to farmers. It is on those small parcels that sheep were most likely to be found, raised along with the other small farm crops and endeavors. Romney sheep produce a good length of wool or staple for spinning. The sheep are sheared once a year in April, right before the hot summer weather. Brushing out the wool is called carding. The carding combs are two wooden paddles with one side covered in a wire bristle cloth, similar to a dog or cat's brush. Once the fibers have been brushed clean and untangled, they're rolled into a small bundle called a rollag, and the spinner pulls out or drafts enough of the wool fibers to make the desired thickness of yarn.
Okay, so the next step is to do 15 rows of just solid knitting. So now we've gotten past the ribbing. We're going to do a solid piece before we start the heel. I'm going to get back to my 6 o'clock. That counts row 1 because we've done 1 row around now with these. The way we do the heel is pretty interesting, which is we take half the needles out of play, and so we're only working on half of the circle. And we get to a progressively smaller and smaller piece, which is the point of the heel, and then bigger and bigger and bigger until you're halfway the circle again, and then join up. So now what's going to happen, instead of going all the way around in a circle, I'm going to go half circle, back and forth like this. And every row of the heel, I take one more needle out so it gets narrower and narrower. Okay, so now I've gone back and forth, and I'm down to 9 needles. So that's, you can run by the point of the heel. So it's right at the bottom of the heel. Now I'm going to start increasing 1 stitch every row. So as I go back, I'm going to put 1 needle back in and put the stitch on it. Okay, so now I have finished the heel, and if you were looking at it inside, you'd see like a big pocket. That's what it looks like, a big curved pocket. So the next thing I'm going to do is put all these needles back in so that I can go all the way around in a circle, and that will join back to the front of the ankle. Okay, so now that I've finished the heel, I'm going to do 55 rows with no embellishment, no ribbing, no moving the needles, no nothing, just 55 rows, and that'll make a nice instep. Okay, that's 55. Now we do the toe. Right now we're actually just finishing up the toe, which could also be called the second heel since it's made exactly the same way. Okay, so now I've finished the toe, which is basically the second heel gusset again. And the only thing left to do is go around to finish the one last circle, and then we go back to waste yarn so that I can feed the rest of the sock out of the machine. Okay, so now our sock has come all the way through the machine and I can disengage it to sew the toe. Okay, so I'm going to cut it up here. I want to leave enough yarn on the machine to start the next sock. So now you can see what we have. 2 heels, the heel and the toe heel. So I'm going to sew closed this part, this little gusset that was the toe. You'll see how it looks after we sew it, and then the toe seam will be right there. Now I've finished sewing all the stitches together. Now I'm going to turn the sock right side out. Okay. Cut off the waste yarn that was at the front of the sock. Ta-da! So just to recap, here's our, what I call the self-sealing cuff with the ribbing, the ankle with the ribbing, then there's a solid part, the heel gusset, the instep, the toe, also known as the second heel. Let's see if he fits.